Hello and welcome to episode 13 of Deep Weird. As always, I am Jacob Pittman, and this is the secret final episode of season 1 of Deep Weird. The original run was meant to be 12 episodes. Then I had an idea for a 13th episode that I thought would really just kind of be a fun way to put a bow on the series. In this episode, there is no interview. It is only me and Olivia, and we are sharing all of our own personal stories. We just asked a bunch of people to come on here and be vulnerable and share all the weird things that have happened to them. So as a way of kind of giving back to those people, we are going to do the same thing. We're going to hear about some ghosts. We're going to hear about some goblins and maybe even a little bit of aliens, a little bit of UFOs as a treat. So let's get it started. I'll go first and get all of mine out of the way, and then you can go second. So I've got about 4 ghost stories that I don't think I've told in any other episodes of the podcast. I told my sleep paralysis story, and I've told a couple of my other weird dream stories on episode 11. So go back and listen to that episode if you want to hear those. I don't want to do any repeats here. So I'll just go with the stories that I don't think I've told on the podcast. Maybe one of them I have. If that's the case, too bad. So the first one I want to tell happened when I was extremely young. This was the first thing that I ever saw. I don't even want to say that this was the thing that made me believe in the paranormal or whatever, because it really isn't. Because I was so young that I didn't really have context for it, and it doesn't really affect my life. I don't think about it very often. Every once in I remember it once every year or something. It's not, I don't really think about it. But I was an extremely young kid, probably 4 or something, and I was asleep in my parents' bed. So that was how young I was. I was still young enough to get away with sleeping with my parents. So I think I was probably I had to have been 3 or 4 or something like that. And I woke up in the middle of the night, and the way that their room was set up was that the closet was at the foot of their bed. So I woke up and I was immediately looking into their closet, and there was a lady in the closet who, even though the room was dark, I could fully see her. And she wasn't, it wasn't like she was emitting a light or anything, but it was just she was lit up somehow. I could see her even though it was dark. And I remember that she was completely pink. Her whole body was imagine the way that you would imagine a stereotypical white ghost or something, but instead of it being white, she was pink, a light pink color. And I woke up and I was looking at her and I was what the hell is going on? And then I realized that I could see the clothes in the closet through her body. So she was a little bit transparent, and I could see stuff in the closet through her. And then and it was an old lady. Did I say that already?
Mm-mm.
Okay. The ghost was what I imagined was probably a ghost. It was a nice looking old grandma lady. Nothing evil about it or weird. I wasn't scared at all. Mostly because I was so young. If this happened to me now, I would probably immediately piss and freak out. But as a kid, I didn't have any idea what this meant. So I was okay, I guess this is just a real thing that's happening now. And she put a finger up to her lip up to her mouth to do a shh motion. And then I just went to bed, and that was it. And that fully 120% happened. It is in my brain permanently.
That sucks.
Yeah, it's really it's looking back on it as an adult, it's if that happened to me now, I would fucking flip out. But I think I was so young that I didn't have the context for, oh, I'm seeing a ghost, or oh, this isn't supposed to happen, or this is, and she didn't look scary. It just looked a nice old lady. And my theory is I would never be able to recognize her again because it's been too long. So there's no point in even trying to go back and find old pictures. But my parents' house that I grew up in was my great-grandparents' house. And I never met them They were dead by the time I was, well, I mean, I don't know, maybe they were alive when I was like born, but by the time I was alive, they were dead. So I never met them. I don't know what they look like. And it's been so long now that there's like no way I'd recognize her. But my theory is that it was probably my great grandma, because I don't know like what other nice old lady would be like hanging out in that house. And that house is 2 bedrooms, and that's the bigger one. So that was probably like the master bedroom. So that was probably her bedroom when she was living there. And all of my other stories happened at our friend Curtis, who you will remember from the Peter episode, which I think is episode 10. He lived in a haunted house, and all sorts of stuff happened to all sorts of people in that house. We have a bunch of people, a bunch of different stories. We're going to do a full episode on that house. So I'm not going to like go into very much detail about what we think the hauntings were, or like any theories, or tell anybody else's stories or anything like that. But I will talk about my experiences in that house as sort of a warm up to doing that episode, which will be coming up pretty soon. So the first time I ever had anything weird happen there, so for context for the rest of these stories, this house was the house that like we all hung out at. And there was a lot of room there. Curtis had basically 2 bedrooms there, and we would always have tons of people over, like all summer long. There was a bunch of people coming in and out of the house. I would stay there for like fucking weeks at a time. We were always there. And one night I had to go to bed early, or I was trying to go to bed earlier. I had a bad headache or like something. I was like tired and everybody else was still awake. So I went to go lay down in the other bedroom that nobody was in. I was like, I'm just going to go to sleep early or try to lay down. I got a headache. And while I was in there, I had like the classic feeling of like, there is somebody else in this room. Like I can like feel somebody in here like looking at me. And it was like driving me insane. And I was trying to like just push it out of my head, because we all had like heard the stories about the house being haunted. So I was trying to like push out of my head and be like, you're just being paranoid. This is stupid. But I like could not get the feeling to leave. And at the time, this room was like kind of trashed, and there was a bunch of like fucking garbage under the bed, like soda cans and like chip bags and stuff. And I kept hearing something moving around in the garbage under the bed. And this house didn't have like, we never had like things getting into the house. Like we never had a rat problem there. We never had like any animals getting in. And I kept thinking like, there's no way I'm hearing that. Like there can't be anything in here. And it just kept happening over and over and over again, that something was like moving around under the bed. And it just felt like viscerally felt like something was in the room. And it got so bad that I just like got up and like left the room and ended up just like staying up. So that happened. And that one, the reason I start with it is because it's not really that big of a deal. I didn't really see anything. It could just be me being paranoid. But now we're going to start getting into like the more bizarre stuff that happened. So the next time I had an experience there was, I don't remember if it was the same summer or not, because the stuff that happened in that house, it was like pretty spaced out. So it's like hard to remember exactly when these things happened. But it was a year where we had this big kitchen table set up in like kind of the dining section of the house that was in between the kitchen and the living room. And this huge table, we had brought all of our computers over and set them up. And we're doing like Turbo Nerd LAN party shit with like 8 computers set up on this giant long kitchen table. And at one point, it was getting hot as hell because it was summer and we were running like 1,000 computers. And I was like, I'm way too hot. I'm going to go outside for a second. Does anybody else want to come outside? And Curtis's girlfriend at the time was like, oh yeah, I'll go out there. Hang on a second. And I was like, okay. And I got up. I watched her walk into the kitchen, go into like the little back room area, and I heard the door open and close. Like I 100% watched it. And I was like, okay. And then I went around and went out there and opened the door, and I opened the door and she's not out there. And I was like, what? Like, what is going on? And I walked back in and she's still in the living room. And I was like, did you not just walk outside? And she was like, no. And I was like, dude, I literally just saw the shape of a person walk from like where we're sitting in, and this was like in a room with a bunch of people in it. And I don't even think it was dark. I think it was like, it might not have been fully light out, but it was like sort of like a dusk. Like it was still like light out. And there was a bunch of people in the room. And I fully saw like what I guess was, because I thought that it was her because I only saw like the shape of it. And I fully saw the shape of a person walk in front of me, go into the kitchen, go into the back room, and I heard the door open and shut. And it's been so long now that I don't remember if other people heard the door or like what the deal was. But that was nuts because I 100% physically saw something, and it was so like convincing that I thought that was her walking outside, and I like, followed her out there. And then when I opened the door, I was like shocked. And I went back in and I was telling everybody, I was like, dude, this is insane. Like, are we all in here? And everybody was accounted for, and that was nuts. Then this next one, I go back and forth on this one, and for reasons that'll be clear when we get to the end here, because I think we've kind of like debunked this one a little bit. So it was another one of these summers where I'm over there all the time, or one of these weekends where I'm over there, and Curtis's girlfriend at the time, this girl was a different one from the one in the previous story. She was there, and she had like an ex-boyfriend or something who was like kind of a dirtbag. It would like call her all the time and was like constantly calling the house because the house still had a landline at this point. So he was always calling the house, always calling her phone, always being a sicko and like trying to get a hold of her. And we're all sitting in Curtis's room, and the phone rings like once or twice and then stops. And we're like, okay, Curtis's parents must have answered or something. I mean, wait for a little bit. And we were kind of like expecting him to call again, I think, because for some reason Curtis went out into the living room and was like, hey, who did you call? Did you guys answer the phone? And they're like, no, it only rang like twice. We thought you guys answered the phone. And we were like, no, we didn't answer the phone. And then a couple of minutes after that, her ex calls her cell phone, and she answers it, and he's all pissed off. He's like, I know that you guys are just hung up on me, and I know that you're like trying to ignore me because I just called and somebody picked up the phone and I could hear you guys breathing, so I knew that somebody was there. And we were like, dude, shut the hell up, whatever. So she has like whatever conversation she needs to have with him, and Curtis goes upstairs. The upstairs of the house in general was where most of like the scariest stuff happened. So he goes upstairs, and the office phone that's connected to the landline is off the hook on the desk upstairs. So it seems like the phone rang once or twice, and then something took it off the hook upstairs and was like breathing into the phone. Now, the thing about this is that her ex-boyfriend was like a psycho, so he could just be making that up. And also, we think it might have been possible for that phone to ring off the hook, because some of those old phones can ring off the hook sometimes. So we're kind of like 50-50 on that one being a thing or not. And then this last one is the most berserk one, and we still to this day talk about this and have never been able to figure out an explanation for it. And I'll tell like my side of the story here, and then on the Curtis's house episode, we'll have him tell his side of the story. So we are going to bed at like probably past midnight, and everybody else in the house is asleep. And we, out of nowhere, hear this insanely loud slam. Like somebody, it literally sounded like somebody like dropped a 120 pound, just like dead weight in the center of the house. And it like the whole house shook, all of the windows rattled, like an insanely loud, heavy slam that woke up like everybody in the house. And Curtis's dog, that was like a 70 pound, a 65 pound or so golden retriever, was like screaming, like going insane, like the worst noises I've ever heard a dog make, just going berserk. I'm thinking like, oh, they have this gigantic hardwood entertainment center in the living room that takes up like a whole wall. And it was one of the old ones that you'd put like a big TV on, like one of the huge, like nice ones. And I thought like somehow that tipped over and is like crushing the dog right now. So I don't run out into the living room. Curtis runs out into the living room and the dog is not crushed. Nothing is wrong. Nothing is out of place. Nothing has fallen over. He asks his mom, like, what the hell happened? And his mom says, I don't know. There was just like a loud noise and now the dog is freaking out. And to this day, we don't know what that was. And the dog was so scared that she wouldn't sleep in the living room for like 3 or 4 days. She only slept in our room, which was very weird because that dog was like his dad's dog. And she would never sleep in our room. She would always sleep either in the living room or upstairs in his dad's room. So we have like no, and we sat down and tried to think about it and been like, okay, maybe the dog was doing that thing where they're like, well, the first theory was maybe the dog like fell off the couch and it was just like 70 pounds of dead weight dog hitting the ground. And that's what we heard. But his mom was sleeping on the couch. So the dog wasn't even on the couch. And then the other thing we thought was like, maybe somehow the dog was doing that thing that dogs do where like they're dreaming and she like got up out of a dream and ran like full sprint into a wall. But even then, the noise that it made was so loud. Like it did not seem like the dog was heavy enough for like all of the windows in the house to rattle like that. And we never figured that one out. And Curtis has a handful of other stories that happen to him that are arguably worse than the ones that happen to me, like weird dreams, other weird animal freak out stories, actually seeing like figures and like hands and stuff. And we'll get into all of that and we'll get into all of our theories about it when we get to that episode. But for now, Olivia, it's time for you to open up the list, bust open the list and get into your stuff. So the first stuff on your list is the old store that you used to work at. You worked in a metaphysical store, and the storefront had a lot of weird stuff going on. And if you've been waiting for the Goblin Hand story since episode 1, by the way, if you have been, I'm pretty sure we teased that intentionally in all the way back in episode 1. If you've been waiting for the Goblin Hand story, you're finally about to hear it, dude. The Goblin Hand story is here. Your patience has been rewarded.
Yeah, there was just all kinds of like weird little stuff that would happen in that store. Just like stuff falling off the shelves, or we'd hear like weird like skittering in the vents, which could be like rats or whatever, but we never had like a rodent problem. And we had customers always saying shit would be happening to them, but also it's hippies. But we had a couple like non-believer people who had weird experiences. It was like the husband of somebody in a drum circle felt like somebody pushed him from behind during a drum circle, and it freaked him out so bad he went and sat in the car because it scared him so bad. But that was just kind of the little stuff. We would see, I guess, figures around the store occasionally. I don't know if they would be considered like, they weren't.
Were they like, I know what 2 stories you're about to tell. So were they like shadows, or did they have like detail?
They weren't shadows, but they weren't like solid edged people, but they were definitely detailed. I don't know if that makes sense.
No, that makes a lot of sense. They're like, yeah, they're like blurry details.
Yeah.
Yeah.
At least that's what I saw.
A lot of people think that when you're seeing a ghost, you're not actually seeing it with your eyes.
Yeah.
The image is being projected like directly into your brain.
Mm-hmm.
So it's going to look like weird and like smeared. It's not going to look like a sharp image because you're not seeing like light bounce off of something. You're getting an image projected into your brain. It's like one of the leading theories.
Like, I think it was Thanksgiving night. We were there just like doing some stuff. And then I walked through one of the main doorways, and right to my left, I saw it like out of the corner of my eye and then looked over, but it was like a full dude in a white shirt, like looking at the jewelry displays as I was walking through. And I just looked to my side and he was there and then he wasn't. Like it was that quick, but it was still like, that was just a dude standing there.
Yeah, and I was actually there that night and missed it. You went out into the room in front of me, and you came back and you're like, I just fully saw a guy standing in a jewelry room, and I was so upset that I missed it.
And then it was that same room, actually. It's connected to like another main room, and there's like a big doorway that you can like look into it from. And I was standing in the front room, kind of like looking towards that doorway, talking to somebody who's like facing away from the doorway. And as I was talking, I like looked, and I'm pretty sure the store was completely empty, is why we freaked out. Because there was a guy standing at a table that was right there. He was wearing a red shirt, I remember, and he had like dark hair. And it was that same like kind of blurry edged sort of like vibe. And then I think he ducked under like behind the desk.
Yeah, that's the version of the story that I heard, that you like saw his face go like duck under the desk.
Yes. Yeah, he like ducked behind the desk. And we were like, what the hell? Because we had customers doing weird stuff all the time, but we were pretty sure the store was empty. And we like went in there. There was obviously not a dude under the tables or like in that room anywhere in the store. And that was really messed up. And then I guess the goblin hand.
Yeah, get us ready for the goblin hand.
I feel like I need to preface the goblin hand with I was high.
Yeah.
But it was just weed, so I was not hallucinating.
Yeah, being high. If you want to discount this story because she was smoking weed, I'm just going to assume that you've never smoked weed in your entire life and don't actually understand how it works or what it does. And also, we live in Washington, where everybody is smoking weed all the time. Yeah. So we are like used to it. We have a tolerance to it. It's not going to make you hallucinate, and it's not a particularly big deal at all.
Yeah. Especially at that time. I had like, my tolerance was like up. So I was just like hanging out. And I was in the store. We had like a little back room that had like a couch in it, and I was staying there. And I was laying on the couch, and I was watching TV on like my tablet or whatever. And the room I was in was dark. Like I had the lights off, but the door was open. But like the room beyond that
also
had the lights on.
I just want to make sure this is clear. Sometimes you would stay the night at the store for various reasons, like because you didn't feel like going home, or like sometimes you would do D&D there, and it was easier to like be able to be like loud and online at the store instead of going home. So like that you would stay the night at the store sometimes. Yeah,
I would stay the night pretty often, and it was not usually an issue. I'd hear like weird sounds, but it's an old building, so I wasn't worried about it or anything. But so I'm laying on the couch, just hanging out watching TV, and then from outside of the doorway, I see like, there's literally no other way to describe it other than just an actual goblin hand, like reach into the door, like reach into the room, and then just like reach out.
Are we talking like a full 5 fingers, or like did it like
no 4? And they were like long, like gross long, like pointy fingers, like 4 long gross pointy fingers.
What color was it?
It was like, because of the shadow of like it being light out there and like dark in the room, it was basically just like shadowed. It was like dark. It wasn't like clearly light skin in shadow.
You couldn't tell a skin tone, but it was like 4 like goblin-y fingers reaching into the room.
Creepy crawly fingers, yeah. And then just like reach out, and then obviously I was like, what the fuck is going on? So I like got up and looked out the door.
What was like the height of when it reached in?
It was low. It was low to the ground.
So it was a goblin hand at approximately goblin height.
Yes, it was literally like I would say like something that's, how tall would that be?
Like about as tall as like a 5-year-old child.
Like probably like 3 feet, 4 feet, something like that. Like where the hand would approximately be on something like that tall. And I got up and like looked out into like the big main room, and obviously there was not a goblin there. So I was just like, okay, like whatever. And I just kept the door closed after that, because like, what am I supposed to do? I just saw a goblin hand. Like,
and the store is interesting because I don't think that building is just like an old shop building. So I don't think anything like nefarious would have happened there. I doubt there was like a murder in that building or anything like that, like anything that you would traditionally think would make it haunted. I think the thing with that building was, this is kind of like a Tulpa egregore situation where you have so many people coming in and out of that building because they're going in there to buy like incense and crystals and shit. You have so many people going in and out of the building that are hardcore believers that you're starting to see stuff happen. Like, because you've got hundreds of people that are coming in there that are like people that really believe in this stuff.
Yeah.
And I think you're starting to get like extremely slight manifestations of things. At least that's my theory for the goblin hand. Maybe with the ghost, I don't know. Maybe there was an old guy, an old shop owner or something who like ran something there and then died. Who knows? I don't think ghosts are dead people anyway.
Yeah.
But it's odd that you had so much stuff going on just in a random store.
Well, we did name like the main guy ghost. Our friend Emma and I, we used dowsing rods. I don't know if you ever knew that, to figure out what Isaac's name was.
Yeah. And then of course giving a ghost a name is supposed to like make it stronger. Yeah.
Honestly, Emma had because me just seeing like the guys and like hearing stuff fall over is like whatever. The goblin hand was pretty fucked up. I did not like that. But Emma had weird stuff happen to her.
I feel like the goblin hand is still like the peak. I don't think
goblin hand is not good. Yeah.
Yeah, that's still pretty incredible to see a goblin hand reach into a room.
That was probably the only thing that has ever actually like freaked me out, supernatural stuff wise.
Okay. Now the next thing on your list is you used to live in a town called Gold Bar in Washington, which we can out you for because you don't live there anymore, and it's not really... It's really out of the way. There's not
there's nothing there.
Yeah, there's nothing over there. And you lived in a house there that had some like kind of wacky stuff happen.
Yeah. We had a lot of really weird stuff happen there. The guy that lived there before us was like a crazy conspiracy guy. Everyone had like weird stories about. But it was every night at like 9:30-ish. It was like right around then. Because it was after my dad left to go to work. We would have... And it was weird because it was right over the spot on the couch that he would always sit. But there would be, like, a rhythmic knocking at that time every single night. Like, it was, like, 3 knocks in a row. And it would happen a couple times, like, spread out. And we always thought that was weird because it was a single-story house and there was no attic. So it would have had to be, like... I don't know, a rat in the ceiling, like, knocking. Like, there's no, like, nothing it could be. But, like, the worst thing that happened there, it was midday. It was, like, in summer or whatever. So it was completely bright out. And we were all sitting in the living room. And it was, like, open to the kitchen. And out of nowhere, we heard, like, it sounded like a gunshot, like, in the house. It was insanely loud. And we were like, what the hell? And we got up because it sounded like it happened in the kitchen. And we went and my mom opened the kitchen cabinet. And when she opened it, it literally like a glass had exploded into like actual dust. Like she opened the cabinet and like glass dust like rained out onto the counter from the cabinet. Like it literally just like exploded into nothing.
Yeah, and I don't know.
There might be an explanation for that. But I don't know it if there is one.
The only thing that like can make glass break like that would be like temperature fluctuations or something. And even then, usually it just kind of like cracks down a seam or like breaks into...
It was like sand.
But for something to explode into like powder like that, like that requires like energy to be put into it. Like, I don't know how that would happen.
And the sound was like loud. It was not like it was like muffled in a cupboard. And none of the other glasses were even like moved from the spots they were in.
Yeah.
Like everything was completely normal other than one glass literally just exploded.
Yeah, that's pretty insane. I don't know how you could possibly I don't know how you could possibly explain that.
At that same house, and it's kind of like a small thing, but we had a string of fairy lights up on one of our like china cabinets, and it was a long time ago because I was pretty little, but I don't remember how it came up or how we got around to it. But my mom and I were like having a conversation with my dead grandma through this string of lights in like, if you like if you love us and blah, 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 like, make the lights blink 3 times. And then they would, like, immediately blink 3 times and then be off. And then we'd ask another question and they'd blink the amount of times we asked about. And again, at that same house, and this was, like, we would go out and do it all the time. It was, like, not nightly or anything, but, like, once a week or something like that. We'd go out in the yard at night and, like, lay blankets down or whatever. And we would watch. They looked the same as stars, so, like, same size and brightness and everything, as, like, a star you would see. But they were, like, moving in these insane, like, not patterns or anything, but just, like, a drone almost. Like, it was just, like, free flying up in the sky, like stars were. It was, I don't know, Jacob might be able to, like, explain that for, like, phenomenon better, but...
Yeah, well, I mean, you're talking about, like, UFOs are famous for doing, I think it's called, like, non-ballistic motion, where they can, like, make right angles and do, like, crazy turns. And,
yeah, like flipping over and, like, zigzagging. It was insane.
Yeah, which and if they were that small, if they were, like, pinpoint, like, stars, that can't be a drone because that's too high in the air. And the light's not big enough for it to be... And this is, like, one of the most common types of UFOs is, like, it literally looks like a star. It's like a pinpoint, but it makes, like, some insane maneuver. People talk about seeing those all the time. And the interesting thing about that is, usually, when you're seeing stuff like that regularly, people report, like, haunting, like, symptoms of a haunting in tandem with seeing the UFOs. You get, like, both in the same time a lot of the times, or both at the same time. This is like a really good, like, high strangeness story.
Yeah.
And it's really funny that it happened to you, who, like, basically doesn't believe in any of this stuff, even though you've seen that and a goblin hand before.
Yeah.
So I think the last story that we've got for you is, like, a little bit longer. Mm-hmm. But to me, I think this one might even be more insane than the goblin hand. I think this is probably the most insane story.
Yeah.
Which is why it's good that we saved it for last.
I was in high school, so I was probably, like, 16 or something like that. And I went to a really, really small school. So it was during my yearbook class, and there was only 4 students and the teacher. And then we had one 5th student that was in there, like, doing an online class, just, like, in the room. And he's important because he was not involved in this, but still, like, saw it happen. And because there were so few of us, we would just chat or whatever. And the teacher was telling us about how when she was a teenager, her and her friends at, like, sleepovers would do this thing called, like, light as a feather, stiff as a board. And none of us had ever heard about it. So she, like, looked up, like, to remind herself about it and explained to us how to do it. We got down on the classroom floor and just did, like, we did the whole thing, the whole, like, I don't remember what it all is now. I'd have to look up what the method is.
Usually how it works is you've got one person who lays on the ground and then everybody else, like, surrounds them in a circle.
It's the 2 fingers.
Yeah, and you put, it could be 1, it's usually 2, I think. You put, like, 2 fingers under them and then everybody chants light as a feather, stiff as a board. And the legend is...
I think there's a longer version, too.
Yeah. But the legend is basically you can get that person to, like, levitate off the ground with, like, just your 2 fingers.
Yeah.
And it's not... It isn't that you're using 2 fingers to pick them up with everybody combined, because it's too heavy to do that.
Yeah.
Like, you would need, like, dozens of people around to, like, and, like, you probably could cram enough people around to, like, make it work maybe, but even then it's like you can't get a finger, like, all the way under to, like, support their back. So the idea is that you are somehow, like, getting them to levitate off the ground.
Yeah. And we practiced a couple times, but we ended up, like, actually getting the girl to float to the point we got scared and, like, everyone pulled their hands away and we literally, like, heard and felt and saw her drop and, like, hit the ground. And she even, like, we heard, like, her head thud on, like, classroom floor. And the teacher was standing there and saw it, and the other guy was standing there and saw it and was like, everyone was freaked out.
Do you think you'd be able to, like, get a hold of that teacher?
She's retired now. I don't know if I'd be able to. I could try.
We should try.
Yeah.
Definitely. So one part of that story that was interesting that I remember you telling me the first time is that you tried it a couple of times and you were like goofing around and it didn't work.
Yeah, we like practiced and like messed around with it and then ended up.
And then the last time you guys were like, okay guys, let's like actually try it for, like, let's be serious.
She
about
like turned
it,
the
one
lights
time.
off and we were like, okay, well let's actually do it for real for like one time.
Yeah.
And that's the time she ended up floating.
Yeah. Which we've got to try to find the teacher, dude. If she's retired, she's probably still, I doubt she's dead.
It
hasn't been that long.
Yeah.
Because surely she would remember seeing a human being float.
Yeah.
Like how far off the ground do you think she was?
She wasn't like super high off the ground or anything. It was like probably like 2 or 3 inches, 4 inches, something like enough that like her entire body like thudded.
What did you guys like do after that?
We were like 4 16-year-old girls, so we probably just like shrieked. Like we were just freaking out and we were like, okay, back to like doing class because this sucked. We ended up trying to do it a couple more times, but we never got somebody to like do it again.
Well, one of the things that I think is interesting is that like a lot of people, when they start doing like magic type stuff, they can get it to work either once or they can get it to work for like a short period of time.
Yeah.
And then eventually you get like too in your own head about it and like you can't ever really get it to work again.
We were trying to like recreate it after the fact. Oh, it was literally, we were like messing with this off and on for like a week in class because there was like nothing going on. And the teacher like even let us into the auditorium and we went onto the stage where it's like all dark because apparently, I don't know, people had seen ghosts on the stage or something like that at the school. And she was like, oh, this place is spooky. Maybe it'll work better here. And so we like tried to recreate it and we just couldn't. I think we were all too freaked out from the one time it worked.
Well, and you just can't like, there's just something about trying too hard too. Like it's the same thing with like meditation and stuff. Like you have to just kind of like do it without trying to do it. And once you've done it once, the human instinct is to like put effort into doing it again. But it's almost like you can't, if you like try to do it, you can't do it. Mm-hmm. You have to like be completely like empty and just be like doing it without expectation.
Yeah.
But it's like, how can you possibly do something like that without expectation after you've seen it work once?
Exactly.
It's like almost like you're doomed to only be able to do it one time.
Yeah.
So I don't know, what do you think? Do you think you casted a spell? Like what's your theory on that?
I think we just got 4 16-year-old girls to focus really hard for like 2 minutes straight and it actually worked.
Yeah, and teenage girls are famously harassed by paranormal nonsense at a higher rate than the rest of the population.
And she like hit her head pretty hard, so they were trying to teach her a lesson.
Yeah. All right, well, that is all of our paranormal experiences. So now we're even with all the people who came on the show.
I hope you did not build too much hype for the goblin hand. I hope it...
I mean, you did just see a goblin hand. Like, I don't know, like, that is pretty nuts.
The image does haunt me.
Yeah.
Of the hand reaching through the door. Yeah, it was creepy as hell.
Yeah. Do you think that was the worst than the light as a feather thing? For sure?
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah, I mean, you were alone for the goblin hand. Which
and then had to sleep there.
Yeah, that's pretty bad.
I locked the door. I was like, I've seen his hand. He can reach for the knob.
All right, I'm going to take it to the outro. Welcome to the final outro segment of Season 1 of Deep Weird. I don't have a whole lot to say at the end of this episode that I didn't already say at the end of the last episode. I just want to thank everybody who participated in making this project work. It wildly exceeded my expectations in terms of the quality of what we were actually able to put out. And I am very much looking forward to continuing to work on this project. And I've got a couple of leads for the next few episodes already in the bag that I'm working on. And I'm very excited to see what's next. That being said, This project is going to live or die based on how many people come forward with their stories. If you or anybody you know, a coworker, a family member, anyone at all, has a paranormal story that they would like to share on the podcast, please email me at deep.weird@gmail.com. That's deep.weird@gmail.com. I cannot stress enough how important it is to hear from you out there. That is the lifeblood of the show. If you would like to follow us on Twitter, we are at DeepWeirdPod. There is also an active Discord community that you can join. You should very easily be able to find that Discord link. It will be in the podcast description. It'll be on the Twitter somewhere. You can find it in the description of any of my videos on the old Probably Jacob YouTube channel. If you want to support the show in a more material way, you are free to head over to the Deep Weird Patreon, where for a very small amount of money, $2 a month or so, you can help support the show. Most importantly, though, if you enjoyed this season, if you've been listening for all 13 episodes, please give us a 5-star rating and a review anywhere you can. Also, please share the podcast. If you know somebody at work who might want to listen to it, if you've got a family member who's into weird stuff, if you're in some kind of Reddit community or some kind of a Discord community where people talk about these kinds of things, please get the word out. I can only do so much in terms of trying to advertise and trying to make people aware of the show. You as a community can really help out a lot by sharing the show and getting it out there. Deep Weird is written and produced by me, Jacob Pittman, and all of the music you have heard tonight was produced by Griffin Dodefray. Thank you, and we will see you in the next episode, which will be, I guess, episode 1 of season 2, but I'm probably just going to call it episode 14 for the sake of continuity.